I was just thinking about how we met back in 2013, which is pretty crazy.
Wow, has it been that long?
Apparently.
Yeah, that was a great opportunity for me then, and this is great for me now too, to be able to speak with the public about my perspectives on seafood and
Well, I just wanted to give folks an overview too. I know you went from like being a fisherman yourself to an aquaculturist to now are a seafood certifier. So that's pretty cool. You've like seen the um it from all sides basically.
yes, I'm still a fisherman, just not commercial. I never really was a commercial fisherman. I worked on a couple boats here and there growing up. When I studied aquaculture, I never ran a farm or anything. I worked at a couple farms. But when I finished my aquaculture degree in Australia and came back to the United States, there were no farms, at least in Miami. So I decided to start working for the other end of the seafood industry, basically looking at products and how they're regulated and compliance programs and how they're implemented and the regulations and building my interpretation and understanding of the regulation and helping industry, comply with all these different requirements. And kind of, I started working as an auditor, working with a lot of different certification bodies, and then started working more in training individuals and working with the Association of Food and Drug Officials. I worked with the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, and they've essentially accredited me as a trainer to provide seafood HACCP training, as well as training in preventive controls for human foods and foreign supplier verification. So now, basically every month, offering these courses to the public and helping people build their compliance programs. And now I'm doing all of this virtually. So I'm providing training, I'm writing food safety programs, but I'm also working closely with the FDA and industry as a laboratory, vetting products that are on detention without physical examination, DWPE, or what we call the auto detention or import alert. Hold. And so those products that are on hold, I'm looking at them. I'm going to the warehouse, taking samples, and I've been trained in sensory and decomp. And so I'm subjecting those products to a sensory analysis and determining the presence of decomposition and then reporting to the FDA.
Yeah, I was just looking through your website and it seems like you have so much good information and you are doing so much training.
Yeah.
For the training, are you mainly, is it companies who are sending their employees to you, or is it individuals who like yourself or independent contractors and that type of thing?
It's mostly companies that are required to comply with the regulation. And so, whether you're recognized as a qualified individual or in trying to meet requirements of your third-party certification program or trying to meet regulatory requirements, somebody needs to be trained in order to implement these HACCP programs, implement HACCP plans, verify those plans, and make sure that the controls are in place, that the critical limits and parameters and values that are set are sound in science and they're valid, and that that these programs are verified and that they're implemented by somebody that's trained.
And so it seems like going virtual might actually be better for you with these. Or were you doing virtual before and having folks
No,
all over?
no, this whole COVID situation kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and forced us to go virtual. And it's actually created a lot of business for us because we're starting to see clients or students from other countries, which is where a lot of the seafood is being produced that we're importing.
Right.
We're importing close to 90% of our seafood these days. And so, a lot of those producers need to be compliant with US regulations. And so they're contacting me, asking for private courses or attending my open course. And so it's kept me busy.
What kind of ratio of you doing like physical assessments versus?
Yeah, I was traveling a lot to Central and South America. I'm not doing that right now. But I've pivoted to make my services available virtually. So there's a certain amount of information that I can get my hands on and help those processors understand their ability to comply with FDA's regulations. The HACCP programs, all their monitoring documentation, their corrective actions, their verification procedures, and record keeping across the board. I can deal with that virtually. But being in the plant, being in front of the product, being in front of the process, sniffing in every corner, as I've gotten a reputation to do, I can't do that. And so it's painful because it's my profession. I need to be inside those plants. They need me to be there to be able to ask me questions at will, and then provide training, which is essential. I provide sensory training. We pull out and they stage a bunch of samples and we work through them as a group. And without that opportunity to have the product in front of us and be able to calibrate our noses to what is decomposition in the eyes of FDA, that's holding up business.
So who's doing that now for these companies?
Well,
certifications on hold at the moment, or how's that?
Well, yeah, I mean, from a certification perspective, yeah, things are on hold. They're going virtual. They have some tools to do that, but it's limited.
There's certain things you can't do virtually, like smell a piece of fish.
Yeah, well, even so, if that was the case, they know the auditors are coming. You can't go into a country like Brazil without, a lot of heads up.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of logistics that need to be in place in order to get that auditor to that location.
Yeah.
But even so, the auditor should be looking at documentation that goes way back. And then, there's interviews that need to take place, that are difficult to do virtually, in order to judge the understanding of those employees, ask them questions about what types of information they are including in those monitoring forms and how they go about taking corrective action. It kind of has, put handcuffs on the auditing process by not being able to be there. And these environments are very, we've been seeing over time, people are working closely together. They breed COVID. And so I'm not interested. I'm plenty busy from here. I will get back into it once, those protections are in place, like vaccinations and treatments, but until then, I live with my mother-in-law. She's got cancer and diabetes. I'm not dragging this thing into my house.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we take a step kind of back in a sense as far as, I was looking back at the interview we did a few years ago, and as you mentioned recently too, we import 90% of our seafood in the US, but a very small fraction of that is inspected. Is that still the case today? Like essentially, like what's changed in the past 7 years since we've talked? And like in a
Nothing.
good, nothing was what I was afraid you were gonna say.
There's nothing that's changed. The only thing that's changed is technology in aquaculture. I would say that has changed. We've really kind of found the holy grail with marine fish. I mean, I'm part of a network of producers that's been put together by Dr. Daniel Benetti at University of Miami in their aquaculture program. And every time I open up that listserv or WhatsApp chat, these people are cranking out fish all over the world, marine fish. And that wasn't the case 7 years ago. And I got no skin in the game. I don't, I used to study marine aquaculture. I guess that puts me in the game because I want to see the development of that industry in a sustainable way. Because the oceans can't do it. We have to turn the page. We have to accept that we're going to grow fish like we grow the chickens. And we've already been doing that for a long time with tilapia and salmon and some other species. But we're doing it now with snapper. And that is a game changer, and we need to support those fishermen that have been putting that snapper on our plates all this time, by teaching them and supporting them in supplementing their income. And that's the only way we're going to preserve working waterfronts. If they're going to have to keep going further offshore, spending more gas to get that little fish, they need to be able to go out to the pens too and stock the cages and tend to them. And, this is their flock, and we
Commercial
can't.
fishermen would be up for that kind of pretty radical shift. And
when they see what it's going to do to their bank account, of course they would. I mean, they're holding on to those properties, that expensive commercial waterfront, and they're struggling to catch fish because it's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
And so, if we could paint the picture of how it can be and stop importing so much and start funneling this money back into those working waterfronts and communities, because they're producing the fish and we're not importing it, and then all the restaurants are supporting it, they got to get with the program. I was with, I don't know, 7 years ago, maybe before that, or it was around that time, I was with the Commercial Fishermen's Association. And I was trying to get them into aquaculture, and they said, "No way, Jose, I'm not into it. Those people are taking away all of our profits, and they're producing all this trash product with their antibiotics and their Frankenfish and all this business." But the reality is that nutrition studies and technologies have become a lot more sustainable than they ever were before, in terms of producing that plate protein for the amount of energy that you put into it. Whether it's they're putting cages of fish out in the water, or they're doing multi-trophic aquaculture where they're farming kelp, or different types of seaweeds and molluscan aquaculture, or they're doing it on shore in tanks. I don't think it's a difficult proposition to say that we're going to grow snapper here in Miami.
Yeah, I think globally, folks for sure understand that we need to create sustainable seafood, and there's opportunity in the U.S. for sure. But I remember back in the interview when I was looking at it again too, you said, people don't necessarily know or care if it's produced in the U.S., which I think was definitely true at the time. I still think that may be true now, and that's really unfortunate, right? Because it would make such a difference.
Price makes the difference, especially right now, because
Yeah.
people are hurting, and so they want to. They don't want to consume chicken every day. They don't want to consume beef every day. They want a piece of fish, or they want some shrimp, and price is going to rule the day while their child is flipping out,
Right,
on their face, and they're trying to just get out of the supermarket. They're going to say, "That shrimp, that's cheap. Put it in the cart. Let's get out of here." And so, I mean, that's the majority of consumers. In my opinion, that's the way they think. If the niche market people that are going to the Whole Foods that can have their shrimp ordered offline, and they can choose from the yellow or from the Monterey Bay's aquariums card about which one's sustainable or not. Sure, there's a market for those people out there. Is that who's eating the majority of seafood? I don't think so. Well, maybe. I mean, seafood has a stigma about being expensive, But I think that's starting to change a little bit more. I think it's starting to become more cost-effective option. It's just about getting people to produce or make a meal in their house.
Yeah.
And now that they're locked up, they're buying more frozen seafood than ever, is what my understanding is. I don't know whether the truth behind that or not, but
Yeah, I mean, I know I've been cooking more seafood at home for sure.
I know I go to the Boston Seafood Show every year, and I see innovative products, coming out every year. So we didn't get to do that this year, but I know that a lot of companies are producing more retail-ready products more than ever.
I guess what my question is, are the certification bodies still certifying right now in general?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, and it really depends on the standard or scheme. Some of them, like Marine Stewardship Council, a lot of that audit is more a chain of custody audit. So it's essentially a
Mhm.
traceability audit, and so they could pick random lots and have that paperwork sent to the auditor, and then they can do Zoom meetings and be back and forth. They don't have to look at product. They don't, I mean, maybe they will do some interviews. They could do that through Zoom, but it's largely a chain of custody traceability audit. So it's suited well for a virtual remote desktop audit, whereas a BRC or BAP or an SQF type of audit or one of these GFSI benchmarked audits are they're food safety centric, and there's a lot of different prerequisite types of programs that would need to be in place. And so yes, you can require that to be sent to you, but I don't know, like in a processing environment, in order to make judgments on good manufacturing practices and sanitation standard operating procedures, you would need to see those practices in play. In order to say, yes, the procedure says this, and yes, that's what you're doing out on the floor.
Yeah. I would be intrigued to like learn how to be trained to come do some of this. It seems like pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's nice to be able to travel to these foreign countries and enter these different types of facilities.
So you said like, the technology aspect has changed in the past 7 years, but as far as within the industry itself, it seems like there's a lot more players going towards sustainability as their goal. Do you feel that or no? Or like
Well,
that?
there's a lot of window dressing. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of political statements being made, but unless there's some sort of level of transparency and traceability to those commitments that are being made, then they're just putting up their what everybody's saying to appease the public, and it's a dangerous game. It's kind of like organic, it's just that term is just slowly being diluted over time. Unfortunately, and a lot of people like to use these terms to sell their products, like sustainability, but it really depends on the frequency of that claim being made, or the frequency that they are tested, rather, on making that claim. Those companies that are making commitments to various certification standards, that's very admirable, because that costs a lot of money. And that's going to take a lot of time and effort to bring all those different auditors in. And they're all auditing essentially the same thing in a lot of cases, like between ASC and BAP. I mean, they're very similar standards. Yes, there's little nuanced differences, and yes, different certification bodies are involved. But to make that financial commitment to a variety of different standards, that's very admirable. Do I advise that they do it? If you can, that's speaking volumes about your commitment to sustainability, because you're having a variety of different certification bodies and auditors that have different levels of competency in auditing. You're allowing them to enter your facility. That's speaking your intention about transparency. If you're making a commitment to technology like blockchain, that's speaking volumes about transparency as well. And so in your supply chain. So if you could stay off the bad boy lists with the governments, and you can make more commitments financially and ethically to sustainability standards, and a variety of them, you're going to be at the top of the game, and you're going to be able to demand the highest price for your product.
Yeah. I was actually just looking at, speaking of the bad boys list, I mean, is that list that you say like just people who are getting the recalls and stuff like that when the products?
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's one thing to have recalls. It's another thing to be caught up in, slave trade, slave labor, human trafficking, customs issues, IUU, illegal, unregulated fisheries. Like you say, there's lists with NOAA. You could get written up for non-compliance with seafood import monitoring program. You could be written up for non-compliance with FDA regulations on food safety. So there's a lot of people that can hold you to task. If it's not the FDA or a U.S. partner government agency, it could be an international agency, or it could be that country of origin that the product's coming from that's writing you up as well. There's some bad players out there, that have ill intentions. I mean, there's people injecting shrimp to increase the weight of the shrimp.
Yeah.
I mean, there's slave labor. I mean, there was some guy found in a freezer the other day on a boat, so it's sad, that these people are willing to play games like that, because there's a lot of people that do their best, like I said, make commitments to all the certification standards. Even some of them that aren't making commitments to the certification standards, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not, they don't have ethical internal standards, and that they're doing things in a way that, that ownership says, we got to do it this way because this is what we represent, and so every time there's a bad news article that comes out about slave labor or mislabeling products, it poorly represents the entire seafood industry.
Yeah.
And it creates problems for the seafood industry. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a member of NFI, and I have been for 4 years now. I'm a member because of the Better Seafood Board, because they represent compliance with FDA and other partner government agencies. And I want to help people understand those standards and help them implement those requirements, meet the requirement.
That's awesome. Y'all have a pretty small crew, right?
We're very small. It's just me, my wife, and our training coordinator, who's a friend of the family. And he helps us with our books and helps us with maintaining the schedule for training. But no, we're a boutique consultancy. We continue to do continuous education for ourselves to keep myself and my wife, actually, we got her calibrated about a year ago now, for her to be smelling seafood and determine the presence of decomp. And so we were doing that some product over last Friday, and she had just eaten lunch, and I said, "Oh, I think I got one here. I think I got some sour here." And she's like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, you got to smell." Because I appreciate that backup, especially on borderline samples. It's nice to have somebody else trained to determine presence of a decomp odor. Sometimes it's fleeting, you know.
Well, even I know, when we educate folks on smell the fish if you can, it should smell fresh. It shouldn't smell fishy, right? But even, when I'm at home sometimes with not even fish stuff, but other stuff, and you're like, is, is that what I smelled? You're like, yeah, not sure. And you
Yeah, yeah, you could get. There's a lot of different odors, and they kind of range from the melons and the grasses, that ocean kind of smell. That's those sweet type of smells that you'd like to get off of a fresh fish, and then you could start to get into a neutral phase where there is no real odor. That's indicative of a decent quality product.
Mhm.
But then when you start getting into the cardboards and the old oil
Mm,
in kind of chemically taints, and then when you get into a sour odor, that's when you've crossed the line from the FDA and the USDC's, the Department of Commerce perspective.
And so can you talk real quick about, on that note, the different grades of seafood? So like there's A, B, C, like, and kind of what we bring into the US for restaurants and, um,
Well, it's a voluntary program that the Department of Commerce has, so they process samples, and they have a processed under federal inspection stamp that they put on products if those companies have made a commitment to those products. Otherwise, I mean, to that certification standard and inspection requirement. But some companies don't make that commitment. So there's, so USDA has prime and choice.
right.
Um, the USDC doesn't have that same level of grading, but it either meets the specification or it doesn't.
Mm, that's fair.
So yeah, so it's pass fail. So I mean, there's grading within the testing that they're doing, and so there's a certain number of failures that is acceptable depending on the size of the sample that's being taken. But their standards are pretty rigorous, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and so they're still active in that program. So, but then there's third parties like myself that that will look at products based on whatever specification that we're provided. Most of the time, it's the purchasing specification of that importer, and just seeing workmanship, uniformity of the sizes. So, they're not purchasing a 21 to 25 count shrimp and getting 31 to 35 count. We'll look at odors, sensory, dehydration, workmanship, broken pieces, and stuff like that. Because a lot of these products they need to be consistent, and so that's one of the things that we see in the difference between wild caught and farm raised products, is that farm raised products are often easier to process. They get scooped out of the pond or the cage, they get put directly into ice and sent directly to the plant, whereas the wild caught products, those guys are fishing around. They could be out there for days, and it's a little bit more difficult to chill down those products and not bruise them up, which
Yeah.
is going to cause products to decompose faster, as you see in tomatoes. If you're batting the tomato around, it's going to get bruised up and it's going to decompose faster. It's no different than the fish.
Yeah.
So the quicker you could cool it down, the quicker that you could freeze it, and put an ice glaze on it to protect it, get it in a bag and keep it in the freezer, you got a pretty high quality product there.
Yeah, there's so many benefits of farmed fish, that it's too bad that people still have this sometimes, immediate, I don't like or eat farmed fish mentality. And you're just like,
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that, the general public has been tainted by the anti-fish lobby, which is made up of NGOs. It's made up of other proteins, competing proteins, and they have a lot of money. I mean, the chicken lobby, the beef lobby, they got tons of money. People eat a lot of chicken, you know, and so however they can spin it, they'll spin it, you know, in order to keep people away from alternative options.
And it seems like too that sometimes there's like within the seafood industry that just the wild farmed, you know, folks like finger pointing, but it seems like that's getting a little better too, hopefully. So
Yeah, all we can do is hope that they're going to get on the good foot and start being nice to one another. But you know, it's understandable, and you have these little communities that, you know, there's wild salmon options and there's farm raised salmon options, and they're at each other's throat, you know, for one reason or another. And you know, what they don't know that they're doing is that they're bringing a bad name to the seafood industry.
overall,
So
yeah.
they need to cut it out. You know, I've been doing this now for 9.5 years, and my concentration is seafood. I don't work with chicken and blueberries and stuff like that. There's even seafood products like canned seafood that I don't work with. I pass those jobs on to my associates and colleagues in the seafood industry, but it's just part of my daily grind, you know,
Yeah.
to get in there with the flashlights and the thermometers and the
Poke around.
and the clipboard and wreak havoc.
Someone's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. It's a dirty job.
Yep. Well, I'm so glad we got to catch up today, and
Yeah, me too.
let's keep in touch since we're both in Miami, you know.
Maybe you'd like to sit in on one of my classes one day.
I would love that, actually.
Yeah, I'd be happy to invite you.
Cool.
You
Awesome.
got it.